for tuning in to Shelley Speaks Truth. If you are here for the first time, welcome and thank you for being here. Your support of the show is greatly appreciated. If you are here for the first time, I do have a co-host, Dre, who chimes in and, gives his sometimes outrageous opinions from time to time. I believe that we may be streaming from a few different platforms. We're usually streaming from Instagram and Facebook. But if you do want to see the entirety of the show, for those of you who have been here, you do know that you have to come over to 2rawfortv.tv if you want to see the entirety of the show, because we're only on those other platforms for a little bit, just to go ahead and introduce ourselves and, see who's going to come and migrate over here with us to 2rawfortv.tv, because some of the things that we discuss over here on 2rawfortv.tv, these other platforms don't really particularly like some of the things that we say. And the whole premise of this platform is for us to be able to have the right to exercise our freedom of speech, where we can say whatever we're thinking and feeling without fear of being deplatformed, taken down, censored, and all of that good stuff. So again, thank you very much for being here tonight. And I do want to just send out prayers to everyone who has been affected by the storm. I didn't know that the storm had affected different parts of the state of Georgia, and I believe South Carolina and North Carolina, to the magnitude that it did, because where I am here in Georgia, we got a lot of wind and rain, but there wasn't, too much damage. There wasn't any flooding or anything like that. But the more information that came in, even while I was at work today, there's people who haven't been able to come into work because they're still without power. I believe it's been almost a week now that some people have been without electricity. So me being from Florida, I know all too well how that goes, to be with, weeks. I believe one hurricane we had back home, we were almost a month without power. So I know how devastating that can be, especially when you have children and you need those essential items that, you may not be able to have access to in the midst of the flooding and, power lines being down and things like that. It may be very difficult for you to be able to travel and get the necessities that you need. But I was listening to one of my favorite podcasters today, Voodoo Doll TV, on YouTube. And what she is doing right now, her and her followers and some other people that she has been able to bring together, what they're doing right now is, if you're in that situation where it's very hard for you to get those essential things that you need, those basic necessities, what they're doing is, if you are able to get online and fill up and, put items in a cart, Amazon, Walmart, or whatever it may be, and send them that cart, they will cash that cart out for you and have those items shipped to your home. For people who are in situations where they can't get to the store, or they're having some type of difficulty being able to get access to those items. So again, if you do look up her YouTube channel, that is Voodoo Doll TV on YouTube, and you can get her information and send her an email or write her in her comment section on one of her videos, and she will, she's having people also, if you want to send your Cash App tag, there's a lot of people that want to help out right now. So you're not in a situation where there's no access to help. There's a lot of people right now that want to send items. And like I said, if you're in a situation where you can't get out to the store and you don't have, access to those essential things, there is help out there for you. There's people, like I said, they are willing to, if you send them your cart, they will go ahead and cash it out for you and have those items mailed to your home. So please, if you are in that situation, don't feel like there's no help for you, because there are lots of people who are out there and who are willing to help. Okay, so there's been a lot of crazy things going on as of late. it's seeming like the end of the year is going to, be a pretty crazy ending. And with everything that has been going on thus far, that is kind of to be expected. You know, for more things, more craziness to continue to happen. So I believe it was Tuesday. Port workers across the country went on strike. And, we're already dealing with record inflation in the country. Not experts, but economists are saying that it's the highest that we've seen, at least in the past 40 years. So this is record inflation. We haven't seen inflation like this in a generation or two. So, right now, the port workers are striking, and there's various reasons why they have decided to strike. And I'm going to get into a brief article about that in a moment. But as we all know, the ports are very important for us to get our essential items that we need on a day-to-day basis. And we don't know how long this strike is going to ensue. Their contracts did expire, and the union decided that they would go ahead and strike because they don't feel like they're being fairly compensated and things like that. But again, while they're on strike, although the stores, do have items in stock, depending on how long the strike is going to go on, we may begin to face some shortages. And that's a situation that people don't want to have to face. But I think that in every situation there is a lesson to be learned. And with everything that is going on right now, I look at this to a degree, in a sense, that it is going to teach people how to survive, how to come together, and how to be able to pool resources and things like that. And unfortunately, it's something that we don't want to have to go through. But I was thinking about this a little bit earlier, and I was saying to myself, I grew up in a family where we were taught how to, have a level of survival skills. And if push comes to shove, and we have to, get in the kitchen and whip up flour and bake our own bread and boil water, then that's what we'll have to do. It comes a time when you really have to just be able to deal with the situation in front of you and not panic. And that's one of the things that we're seeing right now, that I feel like is actually going to speed up the shortages. You have a lot of people, and bless their hearts, because, right now with this record inflation, how expensive things are, I mean, if you're able to go out there and panic buy, you're probably in a pretty decent situation. So God bless you with that. But the panic buyers, I believe, are going to speed up the shortages, because as soon as people heard that the strike happened, they started rushing to the store, buying things in bulk. And again, that is something that is going to speed up the shortages even faster if you have people going out there buying up a bunch of items and, clearing out the shelves, when there's a very big possibility that we may end up facing shortages depending on how long the strike is going to go on. So I do want to get into this article really briefly, just to give people who may not be aware of why this whole strike went down in the first place. I'm not going to read the whole article, obviously, but I'm going to just get into a few key points. So the article goes on to say that dock workers at ports from Maine to Texas began walking picket lines early on Tuesday in strike over wages and automation that could reignite inflation and cause shortages of goods if it goes on more than a few weeks. So the contract between the ports and about 45,000 members of the International Longshoremen's Association expired at midnight on that Tuesday. And even though progress was reported in talks on Monday, the workers went on strike. The strike affected 36 ports in the 36 ports, the first by the union since 1977. So wow, this is the first strike I guess, to this magnitude since 1977. So this is pretty serious. It goes on to say workers began picketing at the port of Philadelphia shortly after midnight, walking in a circle at rail crossing outside the port and chanting "No work without a fair contract." The union had message boards on the side of a truck reading "Automation hurts families" and stand for job protection. Shipping companies made billions during the pandemic by charging high prices. Now we want them to pay back. They're going to pay back, said Butler. So the union will strike for as long as it needs to get a fair deal, and it has leverage over the companies. So again, this is not something that you start and you stop. He went on to say, we're not weak. So basically, what is going on right now is obviously the union members want better wages and they want the company to scale back on automation. Now, I'm a person who has been very vocal about, my stance against automation. I have been strongly against it because I knew that things like this would start to happen, where you would start to see human beings who need to take care of their families end up having to go on strike and protest and do things like that, and ultimately, in some cases, end up being replaced by automation. So it's a very horrible situation to me. I'm a person where I feel like I just don't want to see people be put out of work for robots and computers and things like that. I've been speaking against that for years. It's something that I just completely do not support. And it's very sad to see what is happening now with people, having to feel like they'll be put out of a job and replaced with the robot, because that's ultimately what we're seeing taking place across the country. I want to say about a week ago, I took my niece to a job interview at a McDonald's, and after that, I told my daughters that I would get them some cookies because for some reason my daughter keeps on trying to push and get a Happy Meal from McDonald's, but that is just something that I will not feed my children. McDonald's is the epitome of junk food, in my opinion, and I just won't be buying any food from them. But I did decide that I would get them a dozen cookies because they have been asking for cookies. So I'm standing in the line and I'm literally just standing there and nobody is acknowledging me. You have people in the back packing food. There's nobody at the register. And then I say to myself, okay, I see what's going on here. They're not acknowledging me because they want me to go into the middle of the floor and use the kiosk to place my order. There's nobody at the register to take my order. They want me to go and interact with this machine in order to place my order, which I despise. But I turned around and I did it. I, of course, became frustrated because I do not like interacting even though I'm an introvert, an extreme introvert, in certain settings, I don't want to interact with robots. If I go into a restaurant, I want to have a human experience. So no one's at the register to help me out. I got to go and use the kiosks in the middle of the floor. I ultimately end up not even being able to figure this thing out. So my patience sometimes can be very short. So I'm already getting frustrated. I'm immediately agitated. So I go and flag down a worker and I'm like, I'm not about to use this thing. I don't know how to use it. I don't want to use it. The worker turns around and tells me she doesn't know how to use the kiosks. So she works there and she doesn't even know how to use this machine that they want the customers to use. Anyway, I ultimately ended up getting frustrated with it, told them I'm not using it and somebody needs to get up here and ring up my order. So that's me. I'm the one who is pushing back against all this automation. It's just something I don't want to have to use. I know ultimately one day we'll probably end up having to do it anyway. But for now, I'm pushing back. If I come into a restaurant or something like that and I place an order, I want to interact with a human being. I don't want to have to be forced to use a kiosk that I don't feel like interacting with. But that's just me. Some other people may like it. They may feel like it's not a big deal. But for me, that's not something that I want to have to do. So I understand the frustration of these workers at the port. where they don't want to be replaced by automation. And my thing is, what is going to happen with people losing their jobs and with all this automation? What does these companies think is going to be happening out here? Because if people are unemployed and they can't work, I'm just trying to figure out what's the alternative. What does the government think is going to happen in the situation? I personally feel like chaos is going to ensue because we're already living in a time where we're in record inflation. People can't really afford to get their basic needs met. And now they have to deal with being replaced by automation and not getting a fair wage because these companies feel like, well, we have these robots, basically, is what they are, that can do certain things. So we don't feel like we need to bargain with these people, basically. And again, while all this is going on, the populace is going to be the ones suffering the consequences because right now we need those people working at the dock, getting us these essential items that we need. So again, I'm not too sure what's going to happen with the situation. I hope that they will be able to come to some sort of an agreement to where, there will be something worked out where they can get a fair wage. Because one thing that has happened over time is and people are not taking this into account, is that everything is going up. The price of gas, the price of groceries, rent, everything is at an all-time high, but wages are stagnant. So it's a situation where it's like, how do you expect people to be able to take care of themselves if they're not adjusting the wages to match with inflation? And to me, it seems like it would be a no-brainer for them to say, okay, there needs to be some sort of cost of living, advances to meet inflation. But in many cases, that's not happening. And you're seeing people having to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make rent and buy essential items, which is something that a lot of people are pointing at the Biden and Harris administration and saying their mismanagement of the economy is the reason why we're in the situation that we're in right now. And I tend to agree with that. I tend to agree with that to a certain extent because, we didn't see these numbers when Trump was president. That's something that is just the truth. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know all the ins and outs of how we got into this mess. But what I do know is that it is happening under their administration. And now Biden's administration is almost over and we still don't see any relief in sight. So we have record inflation, and now we have ports all across the country where the workers are striking. And one of the other things that was mentioned in the article, was that if the strike goes on for several weeks, what is going to happen is that we are going to experience shortages, which is going to again drive up the prices and drive up inflation. So we're in a situation where we're already dealing with very high inflation. And now if this continues to go on, inflation will increase. So my thing is, when is all of this going to come to an end? Where's the solutions? And, there's a lot of promises being made right now on the campaign trail where people are saying they're going to do this and they're going to do that. And my thing is, for the current administration, what is their plans for right now? Because people need relief right now. Kamala Harris is saying that once she becomes president, that she's going to do this and that to fix the economy. But people need relief right now. I feel like trying to use that as some type of bargaining tool to get elected, that within itself is just egregious to me, because they know the people need help right now. We need this help right now. We need this relief right now. So again, having people sitting here waiting for campaign promises when I feel that there are things that can be done right now is showing just how much they care about their own political positions over, the people of this country. And, that's pretty much what I have to say on that, because I feel like this strike is going to cause major problems if these companies don't, bargain with their employees and give them a wage that is going to be fair, so that people will be able to take care of themselves. It's not like people are trying to live these extravagant lifestyles. People basically just want to be able to take care of themselves and their families. So again, I hope that they can come to some form of an agreement, because if we begin to face shortages, prices are going to explode, and people are already in situations where they cannot really afford to pay for their basic needs. And this is something that we just don't need to be happening right now, when we're already in a crazy situation. Do you have anything that you want to go ahead and add? Any thoughts on this situation before I move on to?
Um, just the fact that the longshoremen aren't really living. They're not living no poverty lifestyle. They're not the longshoremen of this world today who are out there on strike today. They're not hurting under this economy. What is fair is what I would like to ask, right? What is fair? Because you're talking about we are talking about a 50% raise increase, right? Just so we understand what we're talking about here.
But isn't that over the course of like a couple of years, not just 50% boom? I think it was like over the course of the next 6 years is what they were asking for.
I mean, 50% is 50%, regardless of how you want to slice and dice it. 50% is 50%.
Yeah, but I mean, over time, it's not like they're asking to get a 50% raise on the spot right now.
When we're talking about it, well, it's like the $15 an hour thing, minimum wage, right? When it was set in place, it was set in place everywhere that it was set in place. It was set in place to happen over 5 years, right? It's the same kind of thing, minimum wage versus this. 50% is 50%, no matter how you want to slice it. It's still 50%. That's a lot of raise to ask for, right? Where have you heard of any employee asking for a 50% raise, right? And it's not like, again, we're not talking about people who are hurting under this economy.
But how do you know someone's personal situation to say they're not hurting under the economy?
Because I know a few longshoremen.
But that doesn't mean that applies to every longshoreman that's out there.
The majority, yes. And we're speaking of the majority, yes, absolutely. So the majority of longshoremen out there. So just so we understand, we're talking about a minimum starting pay of a brand newbie walking in the door of about $20-something an hour, $26, $27 an hour. Laborer, entry level, right? These guys, I'm not saying that, okay, so it's a two-sided thing, right? Because the reason why they're asking, there's two-part reason why they're asking for why they're on strike, right? One big part of it is the automation, right? You want to put automation in here after we've been here for hundreds of years, making you guys what you are today? No, I don't think so, right? And that's a huge part of it. The other part of it is like, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Sure, we get paid. We get paid more than the average. But at the end of the day, you guys are making way more. And one thing I've always learned is, as an employee, when I'm counting my boss's pockets, I'm doing the wrong thing. if I'm worried about what my boss is picking and bringing in, I'm worried about the wrong damn thing. That's just me personally, something that was drilled into my head, right? And I've taken that and run throughout life with it, right? My boss did whatever he needed to do to be the boss, right? To own that company and to make those decisions, right? If I decide to take that position that that boss offers me, right? It's not up to me to figure out what the boss is making off of me.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I see what you're saying with that, and I don't think they're counting the boss's pockets per se. I think they're looking at the industry. They're looking at their lives. They're looking at the what is happening right now in this country, and how things have skyrocketed in price. So, you know, I personally feel like if you were living a particular lifestyle and then boom, you get hit with this record inflation, that's why I'm saying there needs to be a cost of living adjustment, because that has not happened in many instances. They keep talking about increasing the minimum wage. They need to focus on cost of living, because that's a real thing. Like, these jobs don't even want to pay a living wage. Before we even start talking about minimum wage, what is a living wage for people to be able to have their basic needs met?
So okay, so on that subject, as you bring that up, right? Because we're talking about the strike, right? I'm speaking from experience, right? 2 weeks ago, I had no idea nothing about this strike. Coincidentally, 2 weeks ago, I was hanging out with a bunch of longshoremen. Offered a position as a longshoreman, and anybody knows me. I'm not the type of person to work for anyone. Right? I'm not the type of person to go and actually go to work for anyone. But after long discussion, just 2 weeks ago, before anybody was talking about any strikes, this was all hush hush, because they didn't bring it up at that point. Made me had to go reconsider, like, hey, even with all these things I got going on, that's kind of like some money that it's almost irresistible, right? And that's before the strike. So we're not talking about people who are hurting for anything here.
But you're speaking from the aspect of people that told you their situation. There's no way that everybody's situation can be accounted for.
Okay, so that's one set of longshoremen that I've interacted with, right? One thing I know about this longshoreman thing is something that they've always been trying to get me to go into, right? From Florida, because I've lived in Florida port cities, Fort Lauderdale, Florida port city, right? Longshoremen like crazy over there. Right, and it's a thing that's kind of held down by us as far as black folks, right? You don't just get in, you don't just apply and get in, right? Somebody's got to bring you in. It's one of those things. People die at that job. They don't go and quit. They don't go and work it for 2 years and quit, right? It's one of those career type things. But with all of that being said. Even the point about watching the boss's pocket and watching, their earnings. With all of that being said, there's a valid point to be had. You guys are making billions upon billions upon billions of dollars, and none of this happens without our backs. So because I realize my value, I'm gonna tell you my value, and you now have to figure out what is it you want to do.
Yeah, that's the whole thing right now. And hell, they have value, because right now people are again, they're in panic mode because they're like, if they're not working and we can't get our essentials, then what? Then what? So yes, they play a valuable role in society. That's without a doubt. And I personally feel like they should stand up for what it is that they feel that they should be receiving. And, you know, it'll come to a point where something will happen. And I hope that they get a fair contract, because that's the thing. They're saying that the contract presented to them, they weren't satisfied with it. They didn't feel like it was fair, and so now here's the strike. Um,
I think the biggest problem is the president of the United States says he's not stepping in. What kind
the
of fucker?
president.
The president of the United States. From what I mean, yeah, that's what I before this, like before it actually went down, like the day before it went down, um, the Mister. But then again, is he able to step in, right? Does he have the physical wherewithal? Can he actually say something? Can he actually make 5 sentences to actually say something to step in? But if he can't, then his vice president needs to, right? The same lady that's running to be our next commander in chief, right? Because if you're talking about, you got to understand how big this thing is, guys. All ports on the East Coast, right? And we're talking about from Houston, so it wraps around. It's not just the East Coast. It wraps around the whole of Florida and all the way back up, right? There's nothing happening. That means there's no, oh, you punctured your car tire? Well, car tires didn't come in that week. They're still sitting out there on the ships. You remember the toilet paper scare on COVID? Well, just think about that on every freaking thing you can imagine.
That's my biggest issue.
I heard one of these port guys talking the other day, and they were like, actually this morning I think it was, and what he was saying is, America doesn't understand. Hospital could be looking for a blood transfusion, and this container has that box inside of it with the blood thing, and it's lightning outside and pouring down rain. I can't stop working. They need that container off of the ship. But nobody's thinking about that guy. That guy that's sitting in the middle of tons and tons and tons of metal in a lightning storm. I mean,
Yeah, it's a very crazy situation when you put everything into perspective. And the reason why I don't have a problem with the strike is because if you know the history of the workforce in America, people weren't always in a position where they could demand a fair wage. I mean, these were laws that had to be passed. This is not something that was just handed to people on a silver platter. People had to fight for these things.
Now let me also put this out there, because as an employer, I can't stand this whole union idea of you unionizing and coming to me as an employer and telling me anything about anything, right?
I think unions are a necessity because people are not good. The world isn't full of good people.
See,
so it's just not. That's something I had to learn the hard way.
I get that. I get what you're saying there.
There needs to be regulatory actions because people don't usually do the right thing.
But at the same time, then you get situations like this, right? So where the union says, all right, nobody goes to work, guys. Everybody go home. Matter of fact, here's what we do. For the next 3 months, hey, keep this on the hush hush, but what we're going to do on October 1st, we're going to go on strike. So for the next 3 months, get all the overtime you can, guys. Get all the overtime you can. Bank it. Put it in the bank, because we're going on strike, and we don't know how long. We're not going to be weak on this strike. So we need you to be able to have a 6-month in the bank. So I need you to rack up all this overtime possible. You know, this is the type of job that you could work as much overtime as you feel like it.
I don't see a problem with it. Maybe I don't even feel like I'm being biased. I just think that there does need to be fairness in employment.
That's my part. Fairness is fairness. I'm with the fairness, right? But when you come into me as an employer and you're coming to me that telling me you're shutting down my whole operation because you got a hair up your ass today. No, I can't. I'm not in support of that.
I get that part of it, but then that's when you go to the negotiating table as quickly as possible, and you may have to
fire your ass and replace you.
Yeah, let's see how that's gonna work out.
It's not because you have this union. That's the problem. That's my point, right? If everybody's not unionized, you don't have this great
America
big
is
walkout.
not getting rid of unions.
Right?
That would be I mean, I don't see any politician advocating for that. That would be political suicide. You will never make it into office.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not advocating for anybody to abolish unions. What I'm saying is, as an employer, that's not one of the things that I'm looking to do business with, right? You come to me as a union and I see red flags. I'm like, okay, yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, I see it from a business person's perspective, but at the end of the day, if I owned a mega corporation or something like that, that would never be a problem for me because I'm not greedy, I'm not selfish, not pat myself on the back or anything, but that's just not me. I'm going to see to it that people are compensated fairly because I'm not going to go broke if I pay these people a fair wage. If I'm making billions and billions and multi-billions a year, I'm not going broke paying people a fair wage. I'm just not.
Exactly.
And that's the reality of the matter.
Exactly.
They're not going to lose any meals or anything that they need or want by paying people a fair wage. So
right.
you just have to be able to negotiate and not let greed consume you, because when everybody feels appreciated, well, not even so much appreciated, because you got some people who just will never be satisfied with anything, but if people feel they're being treated fairly, I would say, then they're going to do their job and everything's going to be okay. And that's what these employers need to come to terms with. You're going to have to do some bending too. It can't just be the employee, breaking their back and never feeling like they're getting any type of fair treatment on the job. But anyway, I'm about to go ahead and wrap it up on the union situation. And like I said, I do hope that they can come to some form of an agreement, because I don't want to see what will happen if we do have to face shortages. Like I said, I'm already kind of mentally preparing myself.
I'm not worried.
Because I know I'll be fine, just on a personal level. But there's a lot of people who probably won't know what to do in that situation. And I don't feel like being in an environment where there's mass hysteria and people are just overreacting. Well, like I said, all you need to do is go home and boil a pot of water and roll some flour and just sit it out. All right, I want to go ahead and jump over into the second half of the show, the second segment, because the election is about a month away, and it will be time to install a new president. And at this rate, it's still a pretty tight race, so they say, on mainstream media.